Welcome back to Hoops Lounge. We're the show with more late game minutes than Andre Drummond. My name is Marc Griffin, aka Montreal Mark. I'm joined by Phil Boileau, Sporting Phil, Justin Rowan, Cavs Canada. Yes, he's not getting many minutes. We're going to talk a bevy of basketball here today on the show. We'll start with a little preview of two teams that I've been talking about for quite a while now. San Antonio Spurs, Golden State Warriors are facing off in a historic late season matchup this coming Sunday. Everyone knows about, the home record versus the 73, all this stuff. But we want to look at these two teams in general. They're probably going to meet later on, probably in May. So let's just get cooking. Justin, I'm going to throw a really hard question at you. I want your honest opinion. Beyond what he's been saying publicly, do you think Greg Popovich cares at all about these records?
I think some part of him cares about the record. I think what he cares about more than anything is trying to find out little things about the Warriors that he can use in the playoff series. I don't think he's going to go out of his way 100% to really make that undefeated record happen at home. Although there's a part of me that thinks he really does care about this, because when you look back at how he coached the All-Star game, a meaningless game, Paul George was creeping up on that points records, and he's throwing triple teams at him. So Popovich is always a bit of a wild card, and it wouldn't really surprise me if he came out with a more aggressive game plan and kind of show his hand for playoffs a little more than we would expect.
Yeah, that was Wilt Chamberlain's record that Bush was going for, by the way. Phil, the other side of the coin, Steve Kerr has quite a dilemma. I mean, they've pretty much got the one wrapped up. He's got guys he wants to rest, but he's got this historic thing. He's got this Michael Jordan thing, his ex-teammate that the guys are gunning for. What would you do if you're Steve?
Look, I think they have so much depth that they have the ability to rest some guys while still being in contention for that. I mean, they've shown even without all their guys being playing at a high level that they can win games over some of the top teams. I mean, they can also lose with their stars against some of the bottom teams. But I can see him limiting minutes and kind of seeing how it flows. But I think he has complete confidence in guys like Sean Livingston, guys like Andre Iguodala at the ball handle. I can see. I mean, I don't know if he has to. I think he wants to rest, but at the same point, I really think that this would be one of those things that propels you into the playoffs. Like, obviously, actually, is it so obvious? Is the second ring more important than the record? And I'm thinking about this now, and I'm not actually sure the answer, because a second ring, 2 titles in a row is really hard to do. Not tons of teams do that, and it would be, the starting something really special. This team seems to be sticking together. Mm-hmm. But would it be more than that? I don't know. I'm not sure about that question.
I think the ring is way more important than the 73 wins. Because if you get the 73 wins and you don't get the championship, you're like the 16-0 Patriots that lost against the Giants.
I was just thinking of those guys. So sad.
And you know what? Like, I think he can rest, because we're talking about 3 games left in the season. 1 matters against the Spurs. The other 2 is against the Memphis Grizzlies, who have nobody left.
And I wouldn't want to play Steph Curry against Memphis, or show on the Grizzlies. I wouldn't want to risk that injury.
Well, you could play him like 2 quarters, and you just nurse that 40-point lead, because there is nothing left of that Memphis team.
Yeah.
Let's look deeper at the rosters of these two teams. One guy we talked about early in the season, I call him the prototype for Draymond Green. It's Boris Diaw. He missed the last game. The game before where they played, he was crucial, integral in the Spurs winning that performance. Phil, what does Boris mean to Spurs in a whole?
I think he can mean a lot of things, but I think he epitomizes the team, how passing is kind of the first needed skill, and also he's a great plug and play. I mean, he's kind of underrated in a lot of things that he does, and I think he's one of those players that, had he kept his weight under wraps longer, I think in different systems he could have been touted as a bit bigger of a star. I think he's a really unsung hero on that team, and a legit big. I mean, they've got a lot of nice bigs this year in Aldridge, Duncan, West, but he's one of those guys. I mean, we've seen him back. Remember in his Phoenix days, he was able to play some center, power forward there, really play strong. I mean, he is a playoff performer, And there's a lot to be said about having stars on teams, but there's a lot to be said about guys who step up in those crucial situations. And I think that's what he brings more than anything. That little offensive tip, that outlet pass. I don't think he's the guy who's ever going to, surprise you with a stat line, but he makes the right plays, and he's a pure Popovich guy that way.
Yeah, I find I like to call him the barometer on that team. I find that when he plays well, it generally means you're knowing the rest of the guys are playing well too. Justin, looking back to Golden State, Draymond, his predecessor, his protege, more or less, he's changing the way the game, the modern game, is played by being very physical and very vocal these days. Do you think that trend's going to grow?
Do I think the trend's going to grow? I don't know about that. There always seems to be somebody in every era that brings that. I mean, you can look at Rasheed Wallace. You can look at the personality that was Dennis Rodman before.
Or Kevin Garnett.
Draymond Green's kind of like the remix version of Dennis Rodman with a little bit of Boris Diaw. He brings so much to the table. He's a really unique player. I think it's something that they might need to monitor. Because like Boris Diaw is the kind of barometer for the Spurs, Draymond Green, he really sets the tone for that Warriors team, at least when it comes to their aggressiveness, kind of their cocky attitude. And as Steve Kerr said after the loss against Minnesota, he really feels like the team's getting a little too cocky at times. They play sloppy with the confidence that they can pull it out at the end because they've done it all season. But that's not exactly the best habits to have going into the playoffs. So I think if Draymond Green can keep that intensity but keep some composure as well, I think that's going to make a big difference for the Warriors.
Phil, I'm going to throw the last question to you, and it's a guy we haven't mentioned yet. I've been watching a lot of the Spurs broadcasts this season, and Sean Elliott has been really on point with a lot he's been saying about Kawhi Leonard. And one thing that's really stayed with me is he said, Kawhi needs to be more selfish. What do you think about that?
Well, I think if you're brought up into the system the way Kawhi was, it's hard to be selfish. I mean, you're brought in a place where he really had to prove himself. I think 14th, 15th pick overall. He was between positions. He didn't seem to have a jump shot. He had to prove all this. Then brought into a Spurs system full of veterans where he definitely wasn't the guy. I mean, he hasn't had to been the guy since college, and it's been a while. And I think while he trusts his talent in his game, it's going to be that crucial point of pulling away, saying this is now my team. And I think while talent-wise he's there, I don't know if he's ready mentally, and I don't even know if that's good for the team. Like I think he can. I think that's the secret sauce of the Spurs. I think any guy on that team or a whole bunch of them can take over and have great games, but none of them have to. And that's what makes them so incredibly tough to guard against. You'll have Patty Mills drop 20 one day. You'll have LaMarcus Aldridge. You'll have Duncan. You'll have Manu show up. Like this whole team we were talking about, Boris Diaw, just guys who can not perform for a bunch of games. He does because he's consistent with his defense and his shooting, but I don't think he has to do that in the way that some superstars do for their teams. I mean, if Paul George doesn't drop 20-something a game, they're losing. But if Kawhi doesn't, they can still win.
Okay, so I'm going to hop on to the next subject because we've talked enough Spurs Warriors. Let's start with the go forward to the future generations of this game. And Bill Simmons tweeted, I think, a week or two ago, Minnesota Timberwolves remind him a bit of the young OKC Thunder. Justin, what do you think of this roster and how it's been assembled?
I don't like the Thunder comparison. The comparison I like is Kobe and Shaq, if they didn't hate each other. You're talking about generational talent, big man. Karl-Anthony Towns is already one of the best centers in the NBA, might be there in the next year or two. And then you got this Kobe-esque mid-range shooting Andrew Wiggins, who a lot of people have criticized, and somewhat rightfully so, for being a moderate efficiency scorer for a while. Both of them are just hitting another gear. Since the All-Star break, both are averaging over 20 points per game, which only 24 players in the league are doing right now, and both of them are in the top 10 for field goal percentage. So they're scoring a lot, and they're scoring efficiently, and they're working well off of one another. And when it's easy, well, it's not easy to get cornerstone franchise talents, but it's even harder to find ones that work together that mesh well. You got Towns' big personality and Wiggins, who's okay stepping out of the spotlight a little bit. I think it's a really, really unique blend of personalities and talent that really sets them up well for the future.
Yeah, and interestingly, it's in a small market too. Phil, where does Ricky Rubio come into play? How vital is he to this team?
I mean, I feel in certain regards he's a nice kind of veteran presence, even though he's pretty young. But
25, yeah.
yeah, but I'm not seeing him there long term. I honestly think if he was going to be their franchise point guard, they would have made more splashes about it, and you'd see less Zach LaVine at point guard. Titus Young plays in key situations. Like, I don't know. I think he's going to be moved. I mean, there are a lot of teams out there who could use a reliable point guard, and who have some good shooters. I think that he's not part of the group. But one guy who I will say, I know I mentioned Levine, is actually Shabazz Muhammad. I think he's going to play his way into that starting lineup pretty soon. I can really see him and Wiggins on the wing, and I think that's, to me, the exciting part.
Justin, in terms of Levine, I mean, they tried him out kind of at point guard early in the season. What do you think is his natural role?
He's a shooting guard. You can't play him at point guard. The numbers are so much better when he's at the off-guard position. He can initiate a little bit of the offense, and that's great to have. I think that's a big part of modern offenses, is having more than one player that's creating for everybody. But he's a shooting guard. He's putting up great numbers, and the team is much, much better when he is on that off-guard position. It's nice to see the chemistry that he does have with Ricky Rubio, with Wiggins, with Towns. He's a good running mate for them. But using him at point guard, it's an experiment that needs to die. Sam Mitchell needs to cut that out of his game plan.
Phil, it's looking like Cat may make third-team All-NBA. I think it's only happened less than a handful of times. I think Magic Johnson may have been the last rookie to get it. Where do you think he stands among rookies all time?
I mean, rookies all time, it's tough to say, but I mean, the very fact, as Justin alluded to, that he can step in and be a presence right away. He is one of the best centers in the game, and if you like. I kind of say it this way: like, if you had to play that, let's redraft a team. How high does he go? I bet you he goes top 10. Like if you're talking actually
overall,
future,
like all players in the league.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're talking really long term, because there's a big gap between
top 3, top 5, like.
Yeah, no. I mean,
MVP.
I'm just being safe because there's some guy who's going to pick Kevin Durant at 27, 28 just because he's thinking short term, right? But yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys that when you look at his game, his poise, I mean, we've spoken at length on this guy before, but I just think it's so scary the way, above all his other talents, just the way he sees the game and is in the right spot, not freaking out all the time. He just looks like one of those guys that he right now is the best Timberwolf in my mind, and whenever I watch the Timberwolves, I have a hard time saying he's not the best player on the floor, no matter who they're playing against. Like, there's some teams the other way, and this is him figuring out the game. Like, this is the first time he's playing some of these centers. He's going to get to play some of these guys 2-3 times now, right? Like, imagine next year, once he's played the DeAndre Jordans 3-4 times, now he gets to go back and look at film of him against Jordan. And now he gets to add that 3-4 points a game. He gets to do all this. I think he's one of those guys that we're going to look at in the kind of the LeBron James kind of esque, like, he's going to be that guy for the next, like him, Anthony Davis, some other guys for the next 10 years where you're just like, wow, like, he's going to be the face of the league. He's got the personality for it, and I'm just thankful for Andrew Wiggins, like you alluded to, that he can be the Robin to the Batman finally, because I think that's the perfect role for him.
Getting back to Wiggins, in terms of his defense, Justin, where do you think he stands? I mean, I think he's been quite inconsistent this year as a second-year guy compared to what he was doing initially last year.
He is much, much more inconsistent. I believe he ranks 89th out of shooting guards, qualified shooting guards, and defensive real plus minus. I think overall he's I think 385 or something overall for in the NBA for real plus minus, defensive real plus minus. He still shows a lot of the defensive potential that we saw last season. He can lock guys up on certain possessions. The ability is all there. I just think he's taken on a bigger role offensively. He's expanded his game there. And it's not abnormal for rookies and second-year players to struggle defensively and try to find that consistency. So I think as the team gets deeper, as they get more balance, as he gains more experience in the league, he's going to develop into a good defender because he really does have all the tools. But as far as his actual impact, he's been a negative overall on the defensive end this season.
Phil, last question on the Timberwolves. Sam Mitchell, is he going to be around next year?
I don't think you can mess with this. I think there are a lot of good coaches out there, but I don't know if I'd really play off this. I mean, I can see the lure of a lot of other guys, but if these guys are growing at this pace under him, I don't know if you risk that chemistry. And this is one of those teams that, you know, and the one thing we haven't mentioned is they're going to get another really high draft pick this year, presumably, right? So if you're able to add a guy like, who knows if a Jamal Murray's in the cards? Who knows if a lot of these guys, I mean, maybe they don't get a 1-2 pick, but this is one of those few teams that I love trades and theories in that. And outside of Ricky Rubio, maybe even selling high on Zach LaVine just because I'm bullish on Shabazz Muhammad, I don't know if I touch this team. I would just let this grow, and if it's working with the coach, I mean, if there's anything that stops the development or there's any issues, I may relook at that, but I don't know if I want to stop this train from running.
Okay, so let's move on to another, let's just say, young franchise. Sam Hinkie wrote a 13-page resignation letter that reminds me a bit of James Joyce meets Malcolm Gladwell. Justin, what do you think of how those words and how they came out and his mind in general?
Ding dong, the process is dead. It's a lot. I think more than all the instability that we've seen from the Sixers over the last couple of years, more than the debates about whether or not they're ruining the game and all that, it really shows just how poor the morale, how poor the organizational structure is that they leaked that. Well, that one of the 13 owners that they sent it to leaked that letter. I think that's terrible. He wanted to go out, have a public statement, address the team first, do it properly, and the organization didn't give him that opportunity. And if you listen to Wojnarowski, there's still a lot of people in that organization that believe in Hinkie, believe in the system, appreciate everything that he did to collect assets. The letter was poorly written, made him seem you understand what people are saying when they say he always acted like he was the smartest person in the room, and there's nothing wrong with being the smartest person in the room. I would know all about that, but you just can't.
What?
You can't rub that in.
What?
I cannot get through doors.
I am the Sam Hinkie of this show.
Wow. Okay, Phil, getting back to the actual process itself. Was it in any way working, or is this the type of thing that it really takes years afterwards to really see with full vision?
Listen, I think you can ask anyone, including Justin. I was one of the bigger proponents for this system. I think if you're going to play in the NBA, you either contend or you're terrible and you collect assets. Look, would I have drafted the same way he drafted? I don't know. I think the Joel Embiid had he not gotten his foot. Look, with any process, there's a whole lot of ifs. But had he stayed healthy, I think we'd be looking at this very differently. Like if we were walking into last year's draft, having a healthy Noel and Embiid as a front court that everyone's just gawking over, and then you have that pick where you can take where you can be like, well, maybe I don't need to go Okafor, maybe I can go Moody, maybe I can go Herzonia, maybe I can go whatever, or maybe I can go Kristaps and somehow think that that's going to be a a tall lineup. Look, where they were when he took over was a terrible team with terrible contracts, and they weren't going anywhere. They had lost a lot of draft picks. They didn't have a lot coming forward. They have a ton of draft picks coming forward. Their future is bright. Look, I don't like that their top 3 assets are all centers, but they don't have a lot of contracts. I know Philly's not the biggest free agent destination, but they have some young talent that if the new GM can kind of play this right, can bring some nice guys. They have 2 could be top draft picks this year, depending on how it falls with that Lakers pick. Plus, you have future stuff. I mean, if a team is not going to contend and you want to rebuild, it's tough to say that this is not the best way to go. I mean, yes, I would have gone with Kristaps over Okafor, but I don't know if I would have made many other moves. I mean, his moves of taking bad contracts and making teams pay for it by taking on picks was genius. I mean, the only people I feel bad for were the fans, but he did spell out the process, and I mean, it's tough because I don't know if everyone agrees with that. I mean, people want entertainment. But at the same point, if you're looking to the future, long-term Philly fan, I look at the tenure of Sam Hinkie and I'm glad I hired him. Our team is literally better set. Like, I'm not saying better overall talent, but better set now than when he took over.
Justin, not that it's the most similar situation, but when after Brian Colangelo left the Raptors, I think his moves kind of came into fruition, re-signing DeMar, drafting JV, getting Lowry. This stuff, it really sometimes takes years down the road to realize how much a GM meant to an organization. Do you think Jerry Colangelo is going to try to bring Brian in? According to Woj, they're working on it right now, and do you think that's a good fit?
No, I don't think it's a good fit. I think they're going to do it. I think the nepotism is going to happen there, and he's going to bring in Brian. Brian Colangelo does deserve some credit for drafting DeMar, bringing in Jonas, bringing in Terrence Ross, although it should be said that there were better options than Jonas and Terrence Ross. It could have Drummond, could have Kawhi Leonard.
And Andrea Bargnani.
Andrea Bargnani. That was a little rough. But he did do some good things. It's just like with Colangelo, it always seemed like every good move was followed by at least 6 steps back. There was never the right supporting cast, and what we see with the Raptors now, this product that Masai Ujiri has put out, has good role players that bring out the best and support these guys that Colangelo did bring in, which is something they never did before. So I think I get what you're getting at. I think Hinkie's put them in a good position for the future. I think outside of Minnesota, there's not a lot of teams that have a brighter future, at least out of the bottom feeders, to turn it around. They have tons and tons of picks. It's just unfortunate that comes in this draft, which is a weak draft, which, again, you need luck if you're going to rebuild, but they have tons of assets. If it's Brian Colangelo managing those assets, though, I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing. The thing is, I never understood why Hinkie's thing is considered so revolutionary and why he thought of it that way. Basically, you just need to have an ownership group that's willing to take on money or pay money, essentially, to get draft picks, which is something Chris Grant did in Cleveland. He would take on Maurice Spates, Wayne Ellington, guys like that to get first-round picks. Took on Baron Davis's contract to get the pick that became Kyrie Irving. So it's not exactly something that's new. I would have liked to see Hinkie get to ride this out a little bit more. I think the Philly organization undermined him. I just wanted to see when he flicked the switch, because the teardown of the asset acquisition is the easy part. It's building it up and building it properly. That's the toughest thing to do, and it is a shame. I wasn't the biggest supporter of Sam Hinkie, but I think it's a shame that we didn't get to see whether or not he truly succeeded or failed at the rebuild once he's actually trying to build.
Phil, the biggest what if of the Sam Hinkie era, let's call it, in Philadelphia, is Joel Embiid. Do you think this guy's actually going to pan out?
I'm the eternal optimist, and I see his workout videos. I think if he ever comes back, he can be one of the most talented centers on that team, if not on a lot of teams. I think he does it. I think it's tough to say because he's gone through all these injuries, but I think his last one in the setback came back a bit too early. Um, I think they realized what's going to happen, and I secretly think that they're banking on Embiid and that Okafor is not part of that future. I know a lot of people may disagree with me, but I really think that they view Embiid as their guy of the future, and I don't think you put this much effort. I mean, you do because it's a draft pick and it doesn't cost you a ton of money to put him in rehab, but I don't know. I don't think you leave that cloud hanging if you have those other centers who you may want to have as your franchise. I can see him coming back, and it's tough because I can understand why 99% of the people would not see it, but I'm looking at my crystal ball, and I think he's their franchise center going forward.
Okay, so moving forward to our last segment on the show. If you've been watching this season, you know for the last few months, been talking about the Kobe Bryant farewell tour and how he's a member of a generation that's quickly, dying from the league. And we've been going through all of these players, and I want to talk about the last player before Kobe, the only person who could really be talked in terms of being an equal to Mr. Bryant, and that's Tim Duncan. Phil, I'm going to throw it to you first. And thinking back to Tim Duncan when he was at Wake Forest and in the draft camps, I think it was in '97 when he came into the league, I think he was very misunderstood. People would talk to him and he would stare bug-eyed, and some people thought he was just kind of not intelligent. But the underlying fact was that he was listening and putting a lot of thought into what people said and really into how he played the game. Do you think in a lot of ways he's been a misunderstood player throughout his career?
I mean, I guess so, but I think anyone who studies basketball would know he's highly intelligent. I mean, he's one of those guys that honestly, he the fact that Greg Popovich actually listens to him when it comes to things is actually telling enough to me. But he's one of those guys. He's always learning, and I mean, we're talking about like the Kobe Bryant kind of saga there, and I'm one of the people who actually puts Tim Duncan ahead of him in on that list. I know I made some flack for that, but I think when you look at a player who's done so much, staying at Wake Forest, learning, I mean, he hasn't stopped. Like he has never had any. It's so tough to be in the NBA, five-time champion, everything given to you, and you're still that humble. I don't think intelligent, like non-intelligent people do that. I think his intelligence is just he's got a bit of a quirkiness too. Um, but I think that's the whole Spurs team. I just think had he gone to any other franchise, he would have been extremely successful. But it's that professionalism. I think he has professional like there's a lot of guys who talk about work ethic, and Kobe was known for that. But when it comes to that mindset of what's best for the team, I don't think there are many players that beat him in that.
I mean, looking back at the history of the game, look at all these amazing power forwards. Guys like Karl Malone come to mind. How was Timmy different than the rest of these guys?
Longevity is a big thing with him. You look at him now, and he's still one of the best centers in the NBA. He was able to change his game power forward to center with David Robinson leaving. Just his adaptability, his ability to survive through so many different eras. Defenses have changed so much, and you look at him now, and he's still the #1 player in the league for defensive real plus minus. Like he has his durability, winning like 60 games almost or 55 games every season. Like it's incredible what he's managed to do. He's been able to defer to other teammates. We've seen Tony Parker, Kawhi Leonard get Finals MVP. He's known when to take his shot, when to kind of sit back, just play that defensive role. Really, and I have to agree with Phil. Like I put Tim Duncan much ahead of Kobe Bryant all time. And it's kind of funny and appropriate that if Duncan does retire after this season, which I don't know if he's going to, but it'd be kind of appropriate that the whole season's been about the Kobe farewell tour when the greatest player of his generation, Tim Duncan, just kind of goes out quietly the same way he's operated throughout his whole career.
Phil, what if you could pick one Duncan moment that sticks out to you? I mean, there's 20 years of them.
Um, I honestly just remember that first championship with David Robinson, how he just hugged him, and it was just that it was just again, it was no ego. It was just like his emotion was taking over him, but he was quiet, and it's all those little looks, all those coy little looks. I mean, how he got kicked out of a game for just his looks, and how that created such a controversy. Um, his little bank shots, his little off the glass, like he never cared about making anything pretty or sexy or fun. It was just efficient. He learned to shoot that little like to me, I think his jumper is super ugly, but it works and he's good at it. He knows what to do. He's a great passer, and he's one of those guys that just like you look at him and you're like, he just looks fun to play with. He looks like he sets a high bar, but he just looks like one of those guys that's really fun to play with. And I don't know. I think he's one of those guys that I'm really gonna miss more than anything. And it's kind of ironic what Justin was saying, because imagine the Spurs take a championship this year, right? Because then that would be 6 to Kobe's 5, and would that really even be a competition anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Justin, do you have a favorite moment?
I don't know about favorite moment, but moment that really sticks out to me, especially as someone that pulled for Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns, was the ball getting kicked out to Duncan at the three-point line, seconds left in regulation, and him hitting that shot. It was like, of course, Tim Duncan, not a three-point shooter at all, hits this clutch shot. It's just ridiculous what he managed to do. He almost averaged a quadruple double in a playoff series. Like he's incredible. He just always would do what it took to win. The other thing that always sticks out to me, and it's kind of just funny, is him at the free throw line. How he used to like stare wide-eyed in terror, holding the ball down like for like 5 seconds before he finally just flung that shot. It's the ugliest thing ever, and I can just see how he would be maddening to play against, because he's so good, he's so polished, but at the same time, like he's just not that conventional superstar. He just isn't there. He's not too high, he's not too low, he's not making the scowl. He doesn't have that kind of extrovert personality that we associate with stardom, and we criticize players if they don't have that typically. But he's transcended that. He's managed to beat Tim Duncan throughout his entire career and be tremendously successful doing it.
And let's not forget how he dresses away from the court. So Tim Duncan sustained excellence, 20 years, 5, nearly 6 rings. I think the three of us are in agreement, the best player of his generation. All right, Phil, I'll throw it back to you to wrap up.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for another great job hosting, Mr. Mark. You can grab us all on Twitter, Montreal Mark for Mark, Cavs Anida for Mr. Justin, and Sporting Phil for myself. Join us for much more in the basketball world, hoopslounge.com. We have plenty coming your way. Tons to get excited about. Playoffs are around the corner, and we'll catch you guys next time in the lounge.
See ya.